All right, finishing up the patron request double feature with Bone Tomahawk. This is the directorial debut of S. Craig Zahler, who followed this up with a Brawl in Cell Block 99, and then after that, Dragged Across Concrete. 3 films I love, and he has not made another film since in 7 years now, which is kind of insane. He also weirdly wrote Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich, which I think is kind of hilarious. I love the movie. I actually think is pretty hilarious too. But I'm saying that I think it's very bizarre that he wrote this. I feel like a lot of filmmakers have those kind of random credits to their name. Damien Chazelle, who directed Whiplash and La La Land and whatnot, he wrote freaking The Last Exorcism Part 2, stuff like that. They were just like, huh? He also wrote S. Craig Zahler also wrote a movie called The Silent Blackout, which I've actually never seen. That's the only film of his that he wrote or directed that I have not watched. But I love everything that he's written or directed that I have seen. So I was very excited that this got requested. This is one of those movies that I'm kind of shocked I don't have a review for. It's possible it was on my old podcast, but that doesn't matter anymore because not only am I not on that anymore, but to my knowledge, you can't even listen to any of those old episodes. I went looking for them not that long ago. I didn't look that hard, so it is possible they're somewhere, but I did not find any trace of them. Wherever we used to have them, they're all gone. Even the ones on YouTube, I think, might be gone. Did I look on YouTube? I can't remember. Regardless, it doesn't matter. Bone Tomahawk. Let's talk about it. We got Kurt Russell. We got Patrick Wilson. We got Matthew Fox. Richard Jenkins. We got a whole mess of people that are very noteworthy here. And they all play very big roles. This is a pretty stacked cast for a directorial debut. I would liken S. Craig Zahler to Quentin Tarantino, and I feel like he's the closest thing we have. Now, I think Tarantino is in another league with his writing style, but I would say that this is as close as we're currently getting. Now, I know there's people that are Tarantino haters. There's always haters of everything, so they're not even worth addressing, to be completely honest. I see a lot of similarities in his work. I'd say the difference is that Tarantino's are very snappy and like fast paced and as to where Zahler really likes to draw things out, and so they can be seen as boring. I've seen a lot of commentary on this film talking about how outside of the third act, this movie is just a slog. And I can understand that for sure. While watching it, I totally get that criticism, but I don't feel that way at all because I really like the characters and I really like their dialogue with one another. He has a very unusual dialogue style, the way that he writes his characters, and I enjoy that. I feel like any director who has a very obvious style to them has this ability where you can absolutely pick out their style from a mile away. Wes Anderson, Tim Burton, whatever. It's like as soon as you see it visually or hear certain dialogue like Yorgos Lanthimos, Lanthimos, however you say that guy's name. As soon as I see a trailer for a film of his, I'm like, oh yeah, this is the Yorgos film for sure. Which I didn't used to like his movies, but now I actually want to go back and rewatch like The Lobster and Killing of a Sacred Deer, stuff like that. I've never seen Dogtooth, but I should probably go back because Poor Things was my favorite film of that year that it came out, which I think was 2023. I really loved Kinds of Kindness. as well, which is another film that's not very well received comparatively to the rest of his stuff. So I don't know. I didn't like his style at first, but after Poor Things, maybe I've completely flipped. So I should go back and check those out. I'm looking forward to his next film that just got a trailer recently. But yeah, Bone Tomahawk. So let's talk about this one. Now, in the IMDb trivia for this, it does say that what they ended up filming for this movie is the first draft of the script. I don't know if this, I would assume this means that he wrote the first draft, then rewrote it, whatever, to try to get it made, and then ultimately just landed back on his original draft. Which I don't know what this says. I don't know if this is like ego, or don't mess with perfection, or him trying to be like, no, I'm not going to play to the system. Because a lot of, yes, that old saying of like every first draft, or like the first draft of anything is shit, I think is how it's said. I don't know if that's particularly true or not. I feel like it's not impossible to write a great thing right out the gate, right? Sometimes you just have like a muse. Sometimes you just feel insanely inspired and you are just vomiting out gold all over the screen. And some people just, they have an unlimited well that they can draw from. And some people only have like one or two really great pieces of art in them, whether it's music or movies or whatever. And I feel like, a lot of your talent at first, sometimes it takes people a while to build up to kind of flex that muscle, that creative muscle, and to find their voice. And some people are just kind of born with it, so to speak. Some people just like have that talent, have that ability to just be unnaturally good at something right out the gate, and then maybe they start strong and then they finish weak. Who knows, maybe the reason he hasn't made anything in 7 years is because he was like, I really just flushed out all of my talent that I had in these movies. And I don't think that, I have a feeling that he either got not blacklisted, but his films, I don't know how financially well they did, so I'd have to look into that. I don't know if he just got overwhelmed by the studios or the filmmaking process or what. He has a lot of credits on IMDb for like upcoming stuff, but clearly none of them have come to fruition yet. But I really hope he gets back to making films. I really do. Because this is kind of crazy to me that this is a first draft. Although a lot of people who find this movie super boring, they're probably like, yeah, this is why movies need rewrites. This is why, studios need to step in and stop people from their worst, intentions. Like, where their ego gets in the way and they're like, no, my shit's perfect and I don't even need a rewrite. First thing I wrote's the best. I don't know. I think that so much of this movie has so much charm to it and such a uniqueness to it. So, whatever. Anyway, we get David Arquette. Once again, this is one of the connecting factors. The person who requests these, they do a good job of matching them up to each other. So, with them kind of having a Western vibe, but also having to do with cannibalism and also having a very simpleton, Old West David Arquette in them. I mean, this is just a perfect double feature that I would have never even considered putting together. With Bone Tomahawk and Ravenous, those are just two titles that I would not think to put together, but now that I've seen them together, they match very well. So very, very good on this person for putting that together. This movie opens pretty brutally. We just kind of have a guy sleeping for a few seconds, and then this kind of visceral experience of watching him smashed and like his throat slit. This movie has some great graphic brutal violence in it. One thing I love about Zoller is that Zoller will kind of do this mix and match where he does extremely hardcore realistic gore at times, but then other times his gore looks like 80s practical dummies, which are like super clearly dummies. Brawl in Cell Block 99 has some absolutely over the top, insane violence in it. It's definitely my favorite Vince Vaughn performance and film that he's ever done. The brutality in that film is actually insane. And the final scene is someone's head getting shot. And it's like, it cuts to it, and it is so clearly a dummy. Like, not even remotely close to realistic in the slightest. And I love that he does that here and there. It's like his style. It's an interesting blend of like, oh, we're gonna make this look more realistic, and then this is just gonna look absurd. Like there's a one of the what do they call them in this? They don't have a tribe name. They call them the troglodytes. So the Native American, freaking assholes in this, cannibals. They have this one guy that Patrick Wilson ends up killing, and he's like digging into his throat to get this thing. We'll get there, but that looks like a fake dummy, straight up. Not even trying to, like, okay, I shouldn't say it looks terrible. It doesn't look like a fucking, like a third grader did, and that's not what I'm getting at. I'm saying, like, he could make it look more realistic. I feel like it's a choice. It's a choice to have it not look realistic. And I don't know. There's something charming about it. So, but then there's other scenes where it looks fucking insane because, I guess we should talk about this here. While the Terrifier kill in the original Terrifier film with the girl being hacksawed in half is crazy. It's violent. It's wild. It's definitely one of the standouts, if not the still peak kill in that franchise for me, just because of how gruesome and visceral it feels. But in this one, which came out a year before Terrifier, I do have to believe that this inspired Damien Leone's kill. Maybe not. It's possible that he thought of that without seeing this, but I'm just going to assume that he saw this and wanted to do it more on screen. This is on screen. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is fucking completely on screen in every way. But maybe it just doesn't last as long. The Terrifier one really just draws it out kind of infinitely. I feel like I'd have to rewatch the Terrifier scene because it's been a while since I've seen it, so maybe it's the same length and I'm just crazy on this, but I just remember that one going on for quite a while. And this one probably is like 10 to 15 seconds long, but it's fucking insane, and that looks super realistic. Like this, so there's a scene towards the end where this guy gets cleaved in half, and it's more brutal. It's more brutal and mean-spirited than the Terrifier kill, and it looks more realistic. So you have that, but you also have the kind of fake dummy otherwise, right? So they're same thing with Brawl and Dragged Across Concrete. I only saw once, so I don't remember as much. I remember there being some brutality in it for sure, head explosions, stuff like that. But I can't remember if they do like kind of the realistic sometimes and dummy stuff other times. Probably. But regardless, I feel like the Terrifier kill gets so much discussion, so much attention, and I feel like this came out 1 year prior and is better and more insane. So why doesn't this get talked about as much as Terrifier? Probably because Terrifier doesn't have a cult following. It doesn't have all of the attention like Terrifier does. Bone Tomahawk doesn't, which is a shame because Bone Tomahawk is a much better film than Terrifier. It's not even fucking close in my opinion. I think this is phenomenal, and I think Terrifier is like fun, kind of fun slasher, but this is leagues better. So yeah, anyway, if you haven't for some reason seen the kill in this at least, and you want to compare it to the Terrifier kill, do yourself a favor, check out both. This one is crazier. This one is more mean-spirited, like I said. So like the guy is scalped, then he has this bone shoved down his throat, and or no, I'm sorry, that's not true. I'm thinking of a different scene. He's scalped, then his scalp is shoved into his mouth, then they take a knife and they stab the knife into his mouth to stick the scalp deeper into his throat, and the knife goes into his throat. Then they flip him upside down. They take like a big like I think it's their bone tomahawk, which is like a half of a big animal's jawbone that's been like split in half and then sharpened to be a bone tomahawk, and then they take that as like an axe essentially, and they just start cleaving this guy from the balls through the ass, and then the two guys on either side of him pull on the legs as he's hitting them, and then they eventually rip him completely in half, and his innards fall out and everything. It's fucking insane. It's one of the craziest kills I've ever seen in a film in my entire life. So I just really wish that this got more attention. Why can you have a movie like this? Because I feel like one of the main reasons that Terrifier got all the attention that it did is because of that kill, because of that having kill. And it's like, this did it first. And it has Kurt Russell in it, and Patrick Wilson, and all the other people I mentioned. So, like, where the hell is the discussion on this? It's not a cultural phenomenon like Art the Clown and Terrifier was. Anyway, we also have not only David Arquette in the opening here, we also have Sid Haig, which is great to see him because obviously he's dead now, and that's a bummer, but it's always great to see him in these types of films. And he has like a black tooth on. I feel like the missing tooth is one of the hardest effects in film to get right, because you can't, unless an actor just is missing a tooth, right? Like in Dumb and Dumber, Jim Carrey just so happened to have a chipped tooth, and so he had the like cap or whatever removed for the movie so that he could just have a chipped tooth for the film, because you can't fake that kind of stuff unless you have a really, really high budget to do a CGI missing tooth where they can see through into your mouth when you talk. It's just, otherwise they just put black over your tooth and they're like, you're missing a tooth. And then when they talk, you can, and they're moving their head around, you can clearly see they have a tooth. It's just black. And it's not because it's like old and rancid. It's because it's painted black. And then then they get killed, and we move into our main story here, where you have Patrick Wilson, whose character has broken his leg. He's being tended to by his wife, who seems to be the town surgeon, which for a film set in this time period, where they were at as a society, to see a female surgeon, I don't know how believable that is, but regardless, it was pretty cool to see, and the girl's gorgeous. And she's taking care of him, and they're trying to have sex, and of course his leg is injured, and he's trying so hard, but to no avail, because his leg is, and this is good because it shows a great dynamic between them, like when she wants him to read her the poem that he wrote her, and when they're kind of talking about their love, and they're trying to have sex, but like they can't really get it done because of his injury. Like, not only does this show his limitations as an injured person for later, but also the love between them. So I thought that this was a good setting of the stage. I did not like the fact that the girl was wearing flesh-colored pasties over her nipples. Boo on that. But other than that, it was cool to see a woman surgeon in a time like this. Then we get David Arquette. He comes into the bar. Kurt Russell comes in as Wyatt Earp, basically, shoots him, brings the girl in to take care of him. She gets abducted and whatnot. So then they get together with the whole town. This small town only has like 200 people, which back then, I guess, that was probably a bigger, like, Western town. I don't actually, it shouldn't be, but I feel like all these towns are very, very small. I think about 200 people now, and it's in a town, and that would be absolutely nobody. But back then, things were much more spread out, and you could just go anywhere. That's what's always fun about watching these like old Western movies, is these guys are just kind of roaming the countryside, putting up camps and tents anywhere they want. They don't use tents in this, but you get my meaning. And there's no land, there's like dispute. There's no, like, everybody fences and all of these different things. And I'm sitting here, I'm watching these guys make camp, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, this is probably the land where Disneyland is now. I always think about something like Disneyland, where that land is just like owned and will never be anything but Disneyland. At one time, it was nothing. It was just regular land like anything else, and now, it's this institution, and it's never going anywhere until like the human race dies out, basically, and that land will always be secured and bordered. And it's interesting. It's interesting to think, and it's not what Disneyland's not even 60, 70 years old. So you go back 60, 70 years, and there'd just be a plot of nothing there. It's kind of wild to think about. Anyway, so they get together with everybody, and then kind of the town native, played by Zahn McClarnon, who I know from tons of stuff, but I always usually refer to him as Crow Daddy from Dr. Sleep. Love this actor. Very, very cool guy. He comes in and kind of tells them the whole mythology, the spook story, fire tale about this nameless, voiceless tribe that no one fucks with. If you go in there, you'll die. And they're just like, we're not going to let these people be abducted. Essentially what ends up happening is David Arquette and his partner go and disturb their land, and then so they follow them all the way back to where they go, and whoever's around them, they grab them and make them their prisoners, which I'm assuming they're like, some of them, of course, they're going to eat. Now the girl, I can only assume is going to be one of their baby factories, or maybe not. Maybe because she's white, they wouldn't reproduce with her. That's very possible, because they also say the black guy who gets killed in the barn, they're like, oh, they didn't have any use for him. Like, they don't think anything of black people, so they just killed him. Like, he's not even good enough to eat, which is just horrible, of course, but he actually got off light. He got off lucky. He'd much rather just be killed the way he was than to be terrorized, kidnapped, scalped, cleaved in half. Like, they did that purposely to be mean-spirited, like to injure and torture that guy, right? Like, there's no reason to do it that way. They could just cut off his head and be done with it, slit his throat. It would be a quick death. But no, they purposely mean to be cruel. We will be cruel to the Nazi. Anyway, so they go out. They Patrick Wilson's character is super injured. He has a broken tibia. It's barely even started to heal, and they take their horses out. They encounter some Mexican guys. Patrick Wilson's, or I'm sorry, Matthew Fox's character. Matthew Fox is great in this. He's a real asshole. He keeps like taunting Patrick Wilson and talking about his wife, and this just does not go well for anybody. But there's a really funny exchange, because Richard Jenkins' character is like a kind of a simpleton, and like he follows Kurt Russell's every move, and kind of looks up to him as like a hero, and he's his deputy, which is an interesting dynamic to see, like an older man be the one who's kind of following and fawning after the younger guy as sheriff. I don't think I've ever seen it that way. Maybe I have. I'm just not remembering it at the moment. But that was very like sweet and enjoyable. But anyway, yeah, Matthew Fox, a real arrogant asshole. He's like, I'm smarter than all of you, and he's like, how do you figure? And he's like, well, all of you have been married. And he's like, what does that have to do with anything? He's like, married, like, what does he say? He says married men, smart men don't get married. And Richard Jenkins thinks about it for a second. He's like, well, you got a point there. that was a very funny exchange. Then there's the exchange between Kurt Russell and Richard Jenkins when they're trying to sleep, and he's asking him, like, have you ever tried to read in the bath? And he's like, why are you so concerned with reading literature while taking a bath? And all that stuff, I can see how people would find that boring and useless, and it doesn't drive the story or the plot forward. And I think there's a lot of impatience these days with just character development. Like, this just makes them relatable, fun characters because essentially this is a hangout movie in the Old West where they just so happen to also be on a mission. Like, the way the dialogue is written for like a hangout movie, like a Dazed and Confused but a Western. And then there is a plot to it too. So it's a hangout film in dialogue, but then in structure it's more of a like a revenge tale of like getting someone back, a pursuit movie, if you will. So it's unique in that way. And then his poor horse gets shot and he has to put it down, and it seems to be like the only thing in the world he cares about. The horses are stolen, which then makes them, kind of fucked, because Patrick Wilson, who is the person who's at the forefront, the driving force of this party, he can't really go on, but he pushes himself for days on end, and they want to like cut off his leg, and he's being left behind, and he's like, no, I won't give up. And I love this about his character. He loves his wife so much that no matter what, even though he has to walk on a broken leg for days on end, he refuses to quit. And whenever they keep telling him, like, we're going to cut off your leg, he's like, no, this is my choice. I'm getting to my wife. I have to have my leg. I'll get there. You go ahead. And this ends up saving them in the end, because he falls behind, they get kidnapped, and this allows him to kind of have a competitive edge on them, because he now sees kind of like the trail of carnage, which puts him more on guard, and they're not as much on guard because they don't know where they're at yet. So it ends up being good for them in the end. Obviously most of them die, but he does end up saving his wife, and he ends up saving Richard Jenkins' character. And Kurt Russell has this kind of final stand, which they said there's 3 left, and we hear 3 gunshots, so I'm assuming he got all 3 of them. We can't know for certain. We don't know his fate. He has to die. His death is fucking brutal, though, man. Like, what leads to eventually his death, where they like hold him down, they cut open his gut, and then they take the like burning hot flask and shove it in his insides. Jesus Christ, these guys are absolute monsters. They really are savages, right? Like, there's definitely a lot of overuse of that word towards Native Americans, and that was a way to dehumanize them and whatnot, and that's terrible. And there's tons of historical precedents for that word having extreme implications and negative connotations, and just outright like as I said, just dehumanizing language for sure, and I see that. But in this instance, there's no better word that could be used towards these guys. They are fucking savages. They are animals. They have no human qualities at all. They don't care about human life. They don't care about empathy. They don't care about anything. Even their own wives, or whatever the hell you want to call them. They have them just shoved up on like a shelf, basically, pregnant with their babies, and they have spikes driven through their eyes, and they're just kind of like tied up as baby machines, baby factories, as they dismember and cannibalize people. So to even consider these things human, which that's another thing. Like, are these humans? I don't even know. And Zoller said he purposely left the supernatural element of this movie vague. I don't know. I don't know if they're like doing body modification where they've taken bones from animals they've killed or other maybe humans and inserted them into their their throats and in their face. The one guy has tusks in his face. It looks like maybe he like inserted them into his face and then they closed around them and now they're just permanent fixtures in his physiology. Like, I don't fucking know. I can't tell. But although I will say that the thing he rips out of his throat with the sinew and all that stuff, that seems like it's part of him. That doesn't seem like it was attached, especially since they didn't have surgeries back then. These guys are so primitive that they don't have any understanding of complex things. So they're not doing surgeries on each other. So I kind of am left with only the conclusion that they are some kind of monsters, that they are some kind of like folklore. Like, I don't know what else to think of these guys, because they just don't have the ability, unless there's some kind of genetic mutation that's happened over years of cannibalism and incest and whatnot. I don't know. I don't know what to make of these things. But that's why it's vague. It's supposed to be like that. But yeah, while watching this, I was like, oh shit, these things are, the noises that they're making when they scream out are terrifying, for sure. And I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that. But regardless, this film feels lower budgeted, for sure, and how it's shot and how it's done. But it's still so fucking good. It's still so wild. The fact that these guys wear like full-on suits basically as they're riding through the desert and sleeping, and this just feels like it would be a sweat factory under those clothes. I was just looking at them like, no fucking way. These things are like denim and or not denim, suede and stuff like that. It would be so hot under there. Matthew Fox's character having his hand cut off and then him just immediately being like, give me dynamite, give me the repeater. I don't know why you'd want a repeater, since the repeater has to be cocked. And I guess if you pushed your arm down on it, you could cock it as long as you had it braced somewhere. But like, you need that second hand to cock it. And I feel like the better gun for him would have been the revolver. You know, back then you had to manually cock the gun every time you wanted to shoot it, and you had to manually reload it as well, like one at a time as you kind of opened it up and slid it in, or you had to take the whole thing apart. Those guns all were different. They weren't automatic like a lot of the modern guns now. So I feel like, I don't know, a repeater would be a really hard weapon. And he only gets off one shot. He only gets off one shot with that gun, and he never blows the dynamite up. That dynamite ends up being completely useless. I thought that Patrick Wilson's character would happen upon it and use it, but nope. It just stays unused, which is interesting. And they end up poisoning them. They said that she, as the doctor, was like, one will die, one will be sick, and one will be basically unfazed. She was kind of counting how long they were drinking and how much they were consuming, which I thought was cool. Yeah, the like realistic kind of first assault on them, where Richard Jenkins has like a piece of his scalp just kind of taken off by whatever is thrown, and he's just walking around and this whole piece of his scalp is just missing. And then you have Matthew Fox has his hand just lopped right off, and the way these guys are shot and blown away, and it felt very real, felt very visceral, which I really like. I really appreciate. And the way they talk to them and the way they treat them are like animals, and I mean this for like Kurt Russell and the way he talks to them. He's like, yeah, drink it. He's like, he can tell these guys are morons. And then, there's a really, really sweet and sad, kind of bittersweet line between Russell and Jenkins, where, you know, he leaves him the gun and he's like, just leave me the repeater. And then he's like, you know, say goodbye to my wife for me, and I'll say hello to yours, since Jenkins is a widower. I thought that was a really sad but really powerful final line to his friend. So really liked that a lot. It's scary when the animal guy, you know, learns to reload. He like pulls the trigger, shoots, and then he's like trying to make it work, and then he kind of like cocks it and then brings it back, and you know, so he's like, you can see him learning in real time, which I really liked, and he shoots him in the side. And then there's like the final moment between Wilson and his wife when he gets her back. She's, you know, he wants to go in for the kiss, and she's like, no, you've been blowing on that, you know, that throat bone thing. And he like takes out water and he cleans off his mouth, and he's like, is that better? And she's like, yeah. So like, you don't get that like immediate first kiss like you would typically in the movies. This is that kind of witty dialogue that I really enjoy. Now, could they make it back on that leg? You know, did he end up losing that leg? And could he even make it back? That reminded me of The Stand, with, what the fuck is his name? I'm totally blanking on Gary Sinise's character. His name at the moment. Why the hell? Oh, wow. That's not. Yeah, I would. Wow. That always happens when you're like on the spot. But Nick Andrews is Rob Lowe's character. Man, whatever. But it kind of reminded me of him, right? Because they're going out. There's like 4 of them. They're on a rescue mission. He falls. He breaks his leg. He has to stay behind. Whatever. So, which ends up working out well for him, and same thing with Patrick Wilson. And also, one of them is, you know, simple-minded, much like Tom Cullen, M-O-O-N. That spells Tom Cullen. So, yeah, I guess there is some similarities in The Stand and this crew. Even though Tom Cullen is not part of that 4-man crew that goes out. He's one of the scouts that goes out. Whatever technicality. You get what I'm saying. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I had a great time rewatching this. I'm very, very glad that it was requested. So I appreciate the request. I'm like trying to remember his name before I shut this off, because I hate not remembering. Right before I get off, I always want to be like, oh yeah, it's, but I'll get it. This is always what happens. As soon as I press stop, I'm always like, oh, it's, you know, whatever. So, oh well, whatever. Anyway, all right, guys. Well, thank you for the request, and I'll see you in the comments. Adios. It's Stu Redman.